The head of cryptocurrency company Binance has pleaded guilty to failing to maintain an effective anti-money laundering program. Changpeng Zhao, also known as CZ, will step down as the company's CEO as a part of this deal. Federal authorities say Binance committed a long list of crimes under his leadership. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen detailed just some of those crimes at a news conference Tuesday.
Binance was allowing illicit actors to transact freely, supporting activities from child sexual abuse to illegal narcotics to terrorism across more than 100,000 transactions. That includes transactions associated with terrorist groups like Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS.
Federal officials also say Zhao was warned about legal violations, but ignored those warnings as well as recommended safeguards. Let's bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge following this story for us tonight. Catherine, always great to see you. From your point of view, what makes this case stand out? I find it remarkable that we heard the Treasury Secretary there say that he helped facilitate terrorism.
Well, that's right. Good to be with you, Errol. What makes this case stand out is just the scope of the investigation. Justice Department officials told reporters today that it is the largest investigation by the U.S. government into a cryptocurrency exchange. Also, the size of the fine, more than $4 billion, and the fact that the CEO has pled guilty to at least one felony and has now been removed from that position. So a sweeping investigation, not only in terms of the scope, but also the settlement.
Now, just a short while ago, we saw the downfall of Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX. I was in the courtroom when the jury delivered the guilty verdict. Binance was mentioned in that trial, but nothing that alluded to potential crime. So why did the Fed start investigating the company? What was it that tipped them off?
Well, in a nutshell, Errol, what officials said is that it had this environment that was akin to the Wild West in terms of financial transactions, that Binance saw the growth potential in the U.S. market. They said it represented between 20 to 30% of potential revenue, and they went into that arena, but they didn't follow any of the laws that would allow them to operate. So, for example, there were no brakes in place to prevent money laundering. There were no brakes in place to stop money flowing to nations that had been sanctioned, like Iran. And there were no brakes in place to stop money moving to these terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Hamas. So it was just the Wild West. There were no guardrails at all. And I can tell from the news conference today and the briefing to reporters that they had been under investigation or under suspicion for some time, but it really took a lot to get it over the finish line and get it to that settlement with the penalties and the removal of the CEO.
Right. So the top player here, CZ, is out. Might we see additional prosecutions, I wonder?
One of the most interesting elements of this case, Errol, is that now the company has to go back and document all of the suspicious activity that it failed to do so under the law. And we're talking about a 3-year period. These are called SARS, or suspicious activity reporting. And the expectation is that this new data will launch a number of additional investigations, and other individuals may be wrapped up in those cases. And we're talking about major felonies here. We're talking about violating money laundering laws. We're talking about potentially financing of terrorist group. And that doesn't even take us, if you will, to the darker side of this, which is the child trafficking, child pornography, and also drug facilitation.
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's turn now to Jacquelyn Melinek, senior cryptocurrency reporter at TechCrunch. I would imagine quite busy these days. From your point of view, what does the U.S. get out of being so aggressive with crypto traders? It is clear the DOJ is making examples of CZ and SBF.
Yeah, you're right, Errol. I mean, the U.S. government is continuing to make an example of those who evade U.S. laws, hurt American investors, and are generally viewed as bad actors in this space. A report earlier this month by the CFTC said that almost 50% of their enforcement actions in 2023 were in the digital asset space. And yes, they cover an array of markets, but the crypto industry was the most prominent. So that's not to say they're done. But because there's money in this space, there will always be bad actors who are going to try and profit off of it. And that could apply to any industry, yes, but as Catherine mentioned too, crypto allows people to evade certain aspects, remain anonymous, and be basically criminal or terrorist if they want to, until the U.S. government steps in and kind of tries to prosecute.
Yeah, and I guess the U.S. also gets $1 billion in fines paid as well. One thing that struck me as I was covering the Sam Bankman-Fried trial is, according to the narrative laid out by witnesses, this was a young, intelligent guy who a lot of people believed and then invested their money with and trusted that he was doing the right thing. That apparently appeared not to be true. But based on your reporting, are these types of cases indicative of a problem with cryptocurrency as a whole, or is it about some bad apples leading the industry?
I was also covering the Sam Bankman-Fried trial, and I remember them referring to him as this young, smart person who was just in over his head in a startup. And I think with CZ, obviously he's a bit older, but there's a similar narrative even after the charges today across the crypto community that he's not a bad person and he's not a bad actor, and that he just happened to evade US laws. And I think that's completely incorrect. He knowingly did this, and he told senior management early on that the US market could represent 20 to 30% of their revenue. So they wanted to be in the US market, and they continued to do this, evading the US because they knew it would inhibit their growth. So I think in terms of bad actors in this space, yeah, there's plenty of them. But I think the US government time and time again will continue to go after them and show them that as long as you want to try and hide, you can't hide forever.
Yeah, and we heard as much from the Attorney General after the SBF verdict, them saying that don't think that this is so complicated, we can't pin you down. Where do efforts stand at the moment then on federal crypto regulation?
Yeah, so some crypto industry players view a lot of these lawsuits as, quote, regulation by enforcement, and call it unproductive and overstepping, given that there aren't that many clear-cut, curated guidelines to the crypto industry, but more so the financial space as a whole. And that's something we're seeing big players like Coinbase advocating for day in and day out in DC, for more policy focused on this new technology instead of fitting into the pre-existing frameworks. As for actual bills, there's been developments in recent months in Congress for bipartisan crypto bills advancing to help the crypto space. But with the 2024 election coming up, I think a lot of this will be put on the back burner.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see just how far back it gets pushed as we approach the election. Jacquelyn Melinek, great to chat with you about this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.